Okay, hopefully everyone can see those. All right, my name is Mark Wallahan, and this is my wedding photo. I'm a forensic genetic genealogist, so you may ask what that is. And I help assist law enforcement with identification of missing persons, John Does, Jane Does, and trans Does using DNA. I have a background in DNA project administration. I began administrating the Houlihan DNA project at Family Tree DNA a few years ago. And shortly after that, I founded the Houlihan One Name Study with the Guild of One Name Studies. A short time later, I began administration of the Holland and Nolan DNA projects as well. I volunteered for the DNA Doe Project, which is a nonprofit that helps identify John, Jane, and trans does. And I am also a search angel, which is someone who helps assist adoptees in finding their biological families using DNA. For purposes of this report, I'll use the basic understanding of female and male to stereotypically be XX and XY, respectively. This report does not include any gender variant data. I'll be covering some advanced topics here, so if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me anyway. I've reviewed all of the previous consultant, Chris Pomery's DNA reports, and I've grouped 45 members from the ungrouped category into their respective genetic families based on the modal values of the STRs in these groups. The main focus area that I'll be speaking about today is SNP testing, which expands on Chris Pomery's recommendations. In almost all of his reports, he suggests to have members test their haplogroup or take a SNP test. And SNP tests have come a very long way in the past 5 years and are now even more beneficial than they were before. Which I'll expand on here shortly. One of the neglected areas of the project is the mitochondrial DNA, which few members have tested, but I will be organizing, analyzing, and reporting on in the future. One new area that the Dalton International DNA Project can look into is starting a surname project at jedmatch.com, which is using autosomal DNA. I've commenced a few recruiting efforts to bring in more members to the DNA project. One thing I've done is start a Facebook group as an open forum for Daltons to discuss genealogy and DNA. If you'd like to join, just go on Facebook and search for Dalton Genealogy or Dalton DNA, and you should see the group. So I just started it at the beginning of September, and we already have over 100 members. So that's promising. Another recruiting technique that I've done is sent out a bulk email to all the people at the Family Tree DNA database with the surname Dalton, and I've invited them to join the project as well. I've aggregated all of the project's SNP data, which I cover just the 4 main genetic groups in the next few slides here. So many of you are familiar with STRs, short tandem repeats. These are the basic Y-DNA tests that are sold at Family Tree DNA. These are the 12, 25, 37, 67, 111 marker tests. SNPs are single nucleotide polymorphisms, which are mutations that occur along the base pairs, the ACs, Gs, and Ts on the Y chromosome. STRs have unknown rates of mutation, whereas SNPs generally mutate every other generation. STRs are known to back mutate, which causes an inflated sense of close relatedness. For example, one person could have a value of 12 at, say, DYS 390, and his son could have a value of 13 at that marker. But his grandson could mutate back to the same value 12 that his grandfather had. It is very rare for SNPs to back mutate. And convergence is where members of one family randomly mutate closer to another family's modal values. There is no known convergence using SNPs. On these next few slides, I've highlighted some of the SNP data from the DNA project so far. Not very many members have done SNP testing, so for some of these genetic families, I use the SNP data from the genetic families group matches. The way I like to think of these SNPs is as people. So for instance, S566 is son of S658, who is son of M222, son of Z2965, so on and so forth. So here we have genetic family A with two members that have done SNP testing. And these two members share a common ancestor, which is SNP S658. And S658 lived 2,000 years in the past, before surnames even began. So this is an example of what the SNP data can do, which is separate the lineages even further than we have previously been able to do, which will help members determine who they are more closely related to in their genetic families. This is genetic family B, and no members of this group have done any SNP testing. So I've selected two matches to several members of the group that have very different SNP paths that could match several members of family B. So members of genetic family B could either be down the path of U106 over here, or they could be down this path of ZZ11 over here. Those two SNPs are about 5,000 years ago. So if some members of this family test positive for these SNPs, and some members of this family test positive for these SNPs, we know that we can split this genetic family into two parts, maybe genetic family B1 and genetic family B2 or something similar. Genetic family C is here, and we all know that members of genetic family C have a common ancestor with a well-documented genealogy in the past 500 years. So all the members of genetic family C are either going to be down this path of ZZ90 or this path of ZZ11. If one member of the genetic family were to do a SNP test or a big Y test, we would be able to determine which path the SNP path goes down. Genetic family D is interesting. Only one Dalton has done a SNP test, and also another Dalton that's not in the project has these same SNP marker values. Well, we have a Fitzpatrick in the group that matched relatively closely. As you can see, there's a wide variance of 850 to 4,000 years. But based on the STR data and the fact that a few other Irish surnames like Phelan and O'Neill are matching here as well, I would assume that it's closer to the 1,000-year mark, which is right around the time surnames first began in Ireland. The Fitzpatricks and the Daltons probably share an ancestor before anyone even began using a surname. So if we had someone join that was not sure if they were a Dalton or a Fitzpatrick, maybe they're an adoptee, they could do a single SNP test and test here F2, oops, F2, FT12563, or they could test here at A1488, and we would be able to tell then if they were a Fitzpatrick or a Dalton. This chart I made using the example from genetic family C. This explains how SNPs are inherited. You can see that a man's son will always inherit his genetic mutations and will sometimes have a new mutation that gets passed down onto his son. This is why SNP testing can be such a powerful tool, because you can decipher which branches of the tree came first based on the SNPs that a person inherits. The big Y test at Family Tree DNA is a SNP discovery test. So Family Tree DNA tests all of your SNPs. And this is helpful because if another close relative does one, Family Tree DNA will define a timeline for your lineage and place the SNPs in order. This can be brought into the genealogical time frame of records and can help prove or disprove relations. For instance, if an adoptee tested and we had two big Y testers from genetic family C, and they were a close match to them, we could see exactly which branch of the family that this adoptee came from. Some of the cons of the big Y test are that you need to remortgage your home or sell your firstborn. That might not even produce all the data that you're expecting or wanting. SNP tests are also subject to change. You may find that in a couple years, Family Tree DNA has a new SNP tester that proves that your lineage is actually in a different location on the haplotree. Some of the next steps, I'll begin developing a target testing plan for members to do SNP tests. Not everyone in the project needs to drop $500 on a big Y. So I'll put together a list based on various factors of members that would be most beneficial to have do these tests. Once we have a few big Y tests in each genetic family, we can have certain members do single SNP tests, which only cost $39, to prove or disprove belonging to a certain genetic family. I plan to regularly create and distribute new content for recruiting and education on the website, on the Facebook group, and on the YouTube page. I plan to focus on SNP tests and big Y tests because I believe that is what would be most beneficial for this group. I will spend some time organizing, analyzing, and reporting on the mitochondrial DNA. And one area in the future I'd like to begin is a Dalton GEDmatch surname project, which uses autosomal DNA. So currently my goals for the project include recruiting more members, having certain members take big Y tests, and analysis and visual reporting of SNP tests and mitochondrial DNA tests. If anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to me however you feel comfortable. My contact information is over here. So thank you for having me, and I'm very excited to be working with the Dalton Genealogy Society.